Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. For those who don't know me, I'm Petya Filipova, Project Manager in Responsible Gaming Foundation, Bulgaria. The topic of our webinar this morning is Developing Responsible Gaming Practice with Mrs. Joanna Whitehall and Craig Cornford. Hi, Joanna. Hi, Craig.
Morning.
Can you introduce yourself?
Morning, my name's Joanna Whitehall. I work for Epic Risk Management. I'm the Sustainability Manager there. I joined Epic from a 25-year career in the gambling industry, where most recently I was the General Manager at the Ritz Casino in London, but I've worked all over the world. So I've worked in Turkey, I've worked out in the Far East, I've worked in the Caribbean, I joined Epic because I really wanted to make a difference in responsible gambling practices and provide some kind of education, the kind of education really that I wish that I had received when I was working in the gambling industry myself. And so I'll just pass you over to my colleague, Craig, and he will introduce himself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, my name's Craig Cornforth. My role is as a harm prevention manager for Epic Risk Management. Joanna and I joined around about the same time, coming up to 2 years for me, just over 2 for Joe. My background is I've been in sales all my life, but I'm here today really for you to ask any questions at the end of Joe's presentation from a lived experience point of view. I am a gambling addict in recovery. 6 years, exactly 6 years, 1 week. I just had to check the date there before we started. And my role consists of me sharing my lived experience story as well as co-facilitating a number of different training sessions with Joe to the biggest operators in the world, both face-to-face, in all sort of corners of the globe really, as well as remotely. Today, Joe will be giving you sort of a snapshot of the things that we do. Any questions you'd like to ask at the end, feel free to. Nothing's off the table.
I want just to tell to participants, you may ask questions at any time, but please use Q&A boxes in the bottom of the screen, and our speakers will answer you after the presentation ends.
Thank you. Okay, so to begin with, we're just going to show you a quick video to explain who Epic are and what we do and who we work with.
Our motto is very simple. It's to take the problem out of gambling. We know that what we're doing saves lives, and that's why we do it. Epic was formed in 2013 in an open prison after I'd suffered a 10-year pathological gambling disorder in which I transacted just short of £5 million, lost over £1 million, and it ended in a suicide attempt and a prison sentence. I'd stolen £434,000 from the bank that I worked for. I had 2 options really. Do you go out and get a job, or do you go out there and actually make a difference to people's lives? And do you actually try and use your experience to stop people getting to the same place that you've got?
I lost my last quid probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I knew I was in trouble then because I had a significant amount of debt to pay off, and I'd essentially stolen £8 grand off my boss.
I think the really frightening side of this all happened without my wife knowing, without my family knowing, without my friends knowing.
I'd borrowed money off 113 different individual people, and I had £497,000 worth of debt.
How do you educate people? How do you prevent gambling-related harm?
It's a cliche, I know, but if I can help one person, then it will be worth it.
Thanks, Craig. So as you can see, we work across lots of different sectors. So when our CEO, Paul, when he came out of prison, he wanted to make sure that he was really making a difference within this landscape. And so he looked at the types of jobs that were the most susceptible for gambling-related harm. And what he found was athletes. They have a very high risk for experiencing gambling-related harm due to the locker room culture, due to a lot of downtime in their jobs, due to being paid usually quite a lot of money, more than they were ever used to getting before, due to getting injured, and lots of different pressures around being an athlete. So the first thing that he did was he started a program for young athletes to go out and talk to them about the dangers of gambling related harm. And then from there, the business just kind of grew naturally, and more people were asking for him and other people that we work with who've experienced harm from gambling to go in and talk about their experience, so that you could really understand what can lead you to that kind of addiction, and also what can prevent you from getting there. So the key objectives behind the work that we do with Epic are to understand the human perspective on responsible gaming. And we do that by using lived experience. So Craig, as you heard him say, he's somebody that experienced gambling related harm. And that's what we use throughout the business. We use that lens of true experience, so that the people that we work with, the athletes, the education providers, the industry, they can really understand that person as a human, not just as a customer, not just as a gambling customer. So that's very important to us within our Epic training. And we also obviously look at the landscape of responsible gaming today, what's going on, what are the gambling commissions saying of the respective countries that we work with, what are the newest legislations, how is that changing, what's the impact on the business. So we look at all of those things. We also look at the business case for RG importance. So we look at why responsible gaming is very essential for conducting good business, within industry, and why that is important. We look at the different signs of harm and the customer's perspective. So we spend time looking at the things that can present themselves, like chaotic play, or use of multiple credit cards or debit cards, late night play, playing on products that customer didn't used to play on, all of the signs that show that something perhaps isn't quite the same as it used to be for that customer. Within that, we also talk about vulnerability. So quite often when somebody starts to gamble in a different way to the way that they were gambling before, or using gambling to get away from their normal life, we talk about the different kinds of vulnerabilities that can lead somebody to start gambling out of control and to start using gambling as an escape. And of course, we know that isn't a safe place to be within your gambling, because it should be with an amount of money and time that feels affordable and enjoyable to the gambler. We also look at different forms of stigma and how feeling unable to talk about your relationship with gambling to friends and family, and even to health professionals, how that can really impact your journey to recovery. So stigma can take many forms, and we will have a look at that later in the presentation. And the other thing that we do is we look at how gambling related harm presents on a spectrum. So understanding that most people, when they start gambling, do so in a way that is fun, enjoyable, affordable to them, but looking at how it can spiral out of control, and looking at the different ways that that can present itself, you know, when you look at a spectrum from no gambling right up to addicted gambling. So this is the kind of work that we do with the gambling industry and the gaming industry. We provide training courses for the operators that we work with, and I'll speak to you about who we work with in a minute. We work with AI, so we work with companies that are able to put together very, very detailed information about the customer journey, looking at all sorts of different points within the customer journey to understand more about whether that person might be at risk of harm, and really understanding that, you know, once somebody is already in a place of harm, then it's very difficult to bring them back and for them still to be a customer within the, you know, for your industry. And how important it is to recognize those risks before they actually develop into harm. We help companies evaluate their own responsible gaming strategies. Within that, we do QA of calls and their customer interventions. So something that we do is we analyze calls from the lived experience viewpoint. So somebody from our lived experience team will listen in to calls between the customer and the operator to listen out for the things really that the operator is doing very well, and some improvements that could be made with that lens of lived experience. We have harm minimization projects. So I spoke a little bit about the work that we do within sports clubs. So we work with all of the collegiate athletes within the USA through their NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Association. We work with all of their young athletes coming through, girls and boys. We work with all of the cricket associations, so men's and women's cricket, men's and women's rugby. We work with the Football Association, men's and women's football. And we also provide a schools program as well. So we go into schools and with our lived experience team, and they talk to the kids about their experiences and how gambling really sort of ruined their careers, and really just talk about their journey, so that kids really can get the same kind of education about gambling as they already do about other topics such as, you know, drugs and alcohol and tobacco. Because we understand now, you know, from the prevalence of gambling, that it's really important that kids also get that kind of education. So the way we deliver this training in schools and in sports settings, it's always face-to-face. But we also do, as we are today, we do webinars, online projects, e-learning modules, and digital delivery. We also provide website review for gambling companies who would like us to kind of oversee what they're putting on their websites, to make sure that their RG messaging seems to be correct for their branding and their product, but is still, you know, carrying the right sort of weight in terms of RG messaging. And we work with retail, so brick and mortar, casinos and bookmakers, and we also work with the remote industry, with the online industry. Thanks, Craig. And these are some of the people that we work with. I'm sure that they'll be familiar to you. We work with Entain for their UK customers, but also for their European customers. We QA the calls that are conducted in the common language of English. And we do a lot of work with them, understanding that obviously there's different rules and regulations around different jurisdictions within Europe. But we also work with Tabcorp in Australia, And as you can see from there, we work with a lot of American companies as well, DraftKings, BetMGM, Fanatics. We also work land-based in casinos. We've started working at the Hippodrome Casino in London, and that project is expanding. So we work with pretty much sort of everybody within industry, within all the different parts of the gambling industry. So, why are we here? Why is it important to talk about responsible gaming? Well, there's two sides to it, really. So obviously, it's really important to understand responsible gaming from the customer side, and that's probably the most important thing. But the upshot of not doing a good enough job looking after your customers is, of course, regulatory action. And even though on the screen, this is something from the UK and it comes from the Gambling Commission, and the Gambling Commission in the UK is very quick to hand out fines and penalties to industry as soon as they see that something is happening that hasn't been addressed correctly. Usually social responsibility failings, so responsible gaming failings, where customers have been allowed to gamble and not been asked enough questions about how they are affording their gambling, how they're feeling about their gambling. And also from an AML point of view, so anti-money laundering from that side of compliance, usually fines are handed down jointly in terms of there's a question specifically to do with where the customer has got their money from, which can be an anti-money laundering type of questioning that hasn't been asked, that should have been asked. But also, if you're not asking your customer where they've got their money from, then you also don't understand how they are affording their gambling, whether that is an affordable amount of money for them to lose, and understanding that, as a customer, you have to look at it in terms of loss rather than just an amount of money that you feel comfortable playing with. So, when it comes to regulation, does the gambling industry have an image problem? So for this presentation, we actually had a look specifically at the Bulgarian market. And what you can see just from a really quick search is that gambling does get mentioned, in a lot of sort of negative press. And this is also the problem that, we have all over the world. It's very rarely do you hear a positive story about gambling. It's usually from a very negative point of view. Having said that, clearly Bulgaria is doing a good job at trying to really tackle those negative aspects. You can see from this headline, which is a recent one here, that your regulatory body, they blocked 150 illegal gambling websites, which is fantastic. Also, we know that you have a national drugs, alcohol and gambling helpline, something that, quite a lot of other countries who have a more established gambling history haven't been able to get like a national helpline going. So people often don't know where to look for help. But within Bulgaria, there is already that available on a national level. So, when we talk about harm and risk of harm, it's easy to sort of get carried away with the notion that gambling perhaps is not a good thing to do and that lots of people are harmed by it. That is not the true story. So we are talking about a very, very small amount of people for whom gambling overtakes their lives and is something that is unmanageable and uncontrollable and not only impacts their lives, but the lives of everybody around them. That is a very, very small percentage of people. The vast majority of people enjoy gambling responsibly with an amount of money and time that feels enjoyable and affordable to them. And it's so important to remember that for many, many people, it is an entertaining pastime that they enjoy very much. And I know from my own experience working in the industry, I had an amazing career, and I saw many people having a fantastic time playing casino games in the club that I worked in. But for the small amount of people that experience harm, you know, we have to look after those people and do the best that we can to make sure that that number of people is as small as possible, and that the negative impacts are as small as possible. And really try and address that before it gets to that stage of harm. You know, when you hear Craig speak, you know, the first thing that he says is, I wish I could still gamble today. I wish that I hadn't become out of control with my gambling, because I miss it. And, you know, you hear that a lot with the people that I work with who have lived experience of harm, and they can't gamble anymore because it went to a level with them, which means that they can never trust themselves not to get back to that addictive state again. But they all say the same thing. They miss it, and they wish that they could still participate in it. So really what we do at Epic, and, you know, in terms of, you know, looking at developing responsible gambling practices wholesale, you're really looking to identify the people early on who look like they're exhibiting some sort of risk. Their behavior as a gambler doesn't look the same as it used to. And that's really a major point within that gambler's journey, is to identify when something starts to look abnormal. You know, the Gambling Commission in the UK really, you know, quite recently managed to really identify this for the industry as a whole, and say, when something doesn't start to look normal within that gambler's journey, that's when you must start asking more questions and find out what is different, what has changed. So, as I said before, lived experience is absolutely at the heart of everything we do. When we're speaking to our partners in the US, we use our US team. We have a team of lived experience facilitators. Ryan, that you see on the screen, is one of our lived experience guys. He was a professional baseball player. He lost his career through gambling, but also through injury. So you heard me speak earlier on about how injury can be that moment where your gambling starts to take a different trajectory, and you start to commit more money and time to gambling. And for him, that was the start of the path to becoming an addicted gambler. For him, it was injury. But even when he recovered from injury, what we often hear from our ex-sports professionals is that they just started to become so involved in gambling that they were doing things like missing training, just trying to leave training early, turning up late, not really invested in the team, just really looking for ways to be out of the spotlight so that they could go and gamble. So what do we know about, you know, the ability to play well and the ability to play safely? You may have heard of the idea of positive play. So positive play is really, you know, the gambler's own pre-commitment. So what we do know from our research, and we also have a research team within Epic that look at all of the recent and most relevant research that has been done, and as much as possible, the research that has been done with real gamblers in real settings in real time, so that you can really understand, you know, the gambler's mindset and what makes play risky and what keeps people in a safe place with their gambling. Can you just advance the screen there? Yeah. So what are the factors that keep the majority of gamblers able to avoid harm? And also, what are the characteristics of at-risk gambling? So if I address the very first point there to begin with, if you could just advance the slide there. So this idea of pre-commitment, most people who gamble, I'm one of them, I don't gamble very much, but for me, I know that I already have an amount in my mind that I am prepared to lose, for example. It's not very much. I'm not a very heavy gambler, but I don't even have to think about it, because in my mind, I know that there is an amount of money that would feel uncomfortable for me to lose. And so I already have that pre-commitment. And for most people who gamble, they do have a pre-commitment of an amount of money that they are prepared to spend. Much in the same way as perhaps if you're not a gambler, perhaps in the same way as the amount of money that you would feel comfortable spending for an evening out, perhaps going for a meal or going out for dinner. You know, that's going to look different for everybody, depending on how much money you earn, how much disposable income you have, how much money you have after you've paid for all of your bills and all of your other financial commitments, and also how much you even enjoy going out for dinner. Some people might not enjoy going out for dinner. Some people might prefer to spend their leisure money on the gym, an expensive gym membership perhaps. So, you know, we all have things in our lives that we have a pre-commitment to a certain budget that we would feel comfortable spending that amount of money on that particular form of entertainment. Having a realistic belief about what is going to happen when you gamble. Quite often, you know, especially people that play slots, they believe that they are due a win. You will see it a lot in land-based operations, especially in the USA, where slots players will, you know, even fall asleep at the machine because they believe that the jackpot is, you know, if they just keep playing this machine, they're due a win, they're gonna hit the jackpot, and they feel unable to leave that machine because they believe that because it hasn't paid out for a particular period of time, that they are due a win. But of course, most of these machines are linked, you know, as far as jackpot goes, because, so, you know, when somebody does win a jackpot, it's not necessarily going to be on that machine. It's probably linked with thousands of other machines. So, and that kind of belief, that kind of belief, you can't see that by common screening tools. So you heard me speak about AI earlier on. You know, that's the ability to look at all of the data on a customer's account, you know, so you can see the length of play, the time of play, the amount that they're playing, the games that they're playing on, you know, all of those kinds of things. But this specifically, the notion of having a pre-commitment to how much you're prepared to play, and also the realistic beliefs part, the ability to avoid that I'm due a win bias, those kind of things can't ever be captured by data screening tools. And that's why it's so important to, whenever you get the opportunity to, is to actually have a conversation with your customer, whether that be via email or web chat or over the phone, because then you can really start to find out exactly what they think about gambling. And as I said, because those things can't be measured by data screening tools. So looking at the bottom list, you know, the characteristics of at-risk gambling. And these are the things, again, that can't be captured by data screening tools. So it's increasingly difficult to gain the same satisfaction as you previously did. There's a real reduction in enjoyment. You're very much numb to the wins and losses. Perhaps, Craig, perhaps I could just ask you to come off mute for a second and just explain how that looked for you when you were gambling out of control.
Yeah, of course. It's unusual because although this is a slide I've obviously seen a number of times, every time I see it, it reminds me that that was exactly what I was like. Only in a small window really of my gambling. You know, I did gamble, probably not very successfully, but certainly enjoyably for decades. But if I would have been able to turn time back and pause, the moment those behavior traits, they would look normally to people, you would think, well, like common sense, I should have been able to notice that this was happening to us. Not just myself as a gambling addict, everybody I've ever met recognized themselves in these traits. I never used to gamble to win in the end when I had a problem. It was quite often problematic winning, which sounds unusual. You know, you would think most people, and almost I would think 95% of our customers, it would be a good thing to win. It became a difficulty for me because once I had the addiction that I had, I couldn't go to bed until the money had gone, and I had to just keep repeating the act. The fact that the cost started to outweigh the benefits in my gambling journey was much earlier than the other ones. You know, the reduction of enjoyment and you know, not getting the same satisfaction. But these and a number of other character sort of traits, if you like, essentially all lead down the same road to the same issue, to the same problem. They all, for me and most of my colleagues and people I've met in recovery rooms, as well as in the professional work that we do, all of these, as Joe's just said, this isn't something that you can particularly or can ever get by data sheets. It's only really by understanding the language, whether it's on text, on chatbots, on actual conversations, and recognizing the signs, and sometimes just mirroring those signs back to the person. Interestingly, nobody who works with an Epic, I think there's 26 of us, just around about 50% of everybody who works for us has lived experience of gambling harm in some way. Not one of us had a single interaction. So it's interesting that these signs would have been something that potentially could have stopped us before we got to the point of where we got. And as Joe rightly said, I could have still been gambling today, which is something that I genuinely do miss.
Thanks, Craig. So what are the signs of risk within gambling? So I'm just gonna, usually, you know, when I bring up this slide, I would ask the room, but obviously it's not really possible today. But if you just have a look down this list, these are the sorts of things that are, it doesn't mean that person has got a gambling addiction, but the more things from this list that you notice within somebody's play, the more likely it is that they are gambling, you know, not in a way that is going to long term be enjoyable or affordable to them. You hear me talk about enjoyment of gambling a lot, because that is one of the main focuses when we speak to industry and talk to them about the way they speak to their customers. The most simple question, and it's the most powerful and impactful question, is to say to a customer, are you enjoying your gambling? That is what you would call a closed question. It's a question that is answered by yes or no. Are you enjoying your gambling? Most likely, even if they're not anymore, they'll say, yes, I am enjoying my gambling. The follow-up question is even more important, because then you ask them, what is it that you're enjoying about your gambling? And we know from our lived experience team that question is then very difficult to answer, because if you're really not enjoying your gambling anymore, it becomes very difficult to talk about things that you are enjoying, because as soon as you start to talk, you know, with somebody on the other end who is able to see your type of play, your trajectory, the way that your play is going, they will then be able to reflect some things back to the customer about their level of play and ask, you know, how their enjoyment is with that. You know, for example, chasing losses. So if you can see that a player has started to chase losses, and you're asking them about their enjoyment of gambling, and they're telling you that yes, they are still enjoying gambling, you can actually specifically address that and say, you know, I've noticed from your account that you seem to be, after you've had quite a heavy loss, you seem to be still looking to win after that. You know, how do you feel about chasing losses? And then, you know, then you can really start to understand what might be going on within that gambler's journey. So just looking down this list, you know, it's not an exhaustive list. There are other elements that could be added to that list. But these things are things that we know are the more risky type of behaviours, things like cancelling withdrawals. In the UK, we've actually stopped people from doing that now. You can't cancel withdrawals. If you say you're going to withdraw the money, then you have to withdraw the money, because what we do know is when you cancel withdrawals, it's very likely that you're just going to play that money straight back. So in the UK, the legislation decided that this was clearly a very kind of risky behaviour for gamblers, and so now then they've made it so that if you say you're going to withdraw the money, you do have to withdraw the money, and you can't just play that money back. So I said, you know, quite at the beginning that vulnerability is one of the key things that leads people to gamble in a way that they perhaps didn't previously, or in a way that looks like, you know, other factors in their life are pushing them towards gambling in a way that isn't sustainable for them, or affordable or controllable for them. And so, you know, some of the things that can put you at risk of gambling more than you previously had done in the past are certain vulnerabilities that happen in everybody's lives. And it doesn't mean that, you know, when you're vulnerable, you shouldn't be allowed to gamble. But it just means that as an operator, when you start to talk to your customers and ask questions, you should be aware of different vulnerabilities and different things that can happen in people's lives that can make them more at risk of gambling related harm. So these are some of the things that we are putting up here. So personal and demographic, that's things like, you know, are you very young? You know, we know that young people are more likely to overcommit, especially with money, to gambling, you know, especially because they might not understand the longer term implications of perhaps taking out credit cards and defaulting on credit cards.
I'll carry on with until Joe comes back in. That's no problem. If that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll just pick up from as Joe was speaking there in terms of the the slides that Joe's been running you through, the last 2 or 3 slides are just sort of snapshots of a larger training sessions that we do, and we're giving you a little bit of an idea of the sort of subjects that we cover with operators and with their sort of CS teams, and this just gives us an idea of the people who can, you know, who are vulnerable. Essentially, when we get to the end of this slide, there's a realization in the room that everybody is at some stage in their life. Everybody will feel some form of vulnerability, and we're back in the room. Joe, try speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, she's back. She's back.
Yes.
Thank the Lord for that.
What happened there? I was talking and then all of a sudden it just went quiet?
Just amazingly, it was just as though I had a remote control and I was managed to turn your voice down. It's something I've dreamt about, but it's never been able to actually work. I'll disappear.
So, did you already take everybody through this?
I did, yeah. So I've explained essentially that this is that, you know, when we get to the end of this, it's there's a realization when we do it with the CS teams and even with the SLT teams, to be honest, it's sometimes there's normally 1 or 2 of them are missed out quite often the ones that are in red, depending on the level of experience of the teams that we're dealing with, the training that they've had, how far they are in their journey of dealing with SG or RG. It's interesting for us to see, and every now and then we learn a new one. There'll be something that we haven't quite considered before. And the takeaway from this, and most of the slides Joe's already ran you through, really, is the realization that not to look individually, but to look at the larger picture, that at some stage in all of our lives, then there will have been some form of vulnerability there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, something that we speak about a lot now is the vulnerability of women and how women present with gambling addiction in a very different way to the way men present, and how much more difficult it is for women to seek help, and also how much more difficult it is for women to access help. Due to the kinds of products that typically women game on, normally more like the slots and bingo type of games, is more attractive to the female population of gamblers. And even from the male community of gamblers who have been harmed, say, for example, at Gamblers Anonymous, which is I'm sure you have Gamblers Anonymous also where you are, where you can go and seek some help. When women try to go to Gamblers Anonymous, they can actually be met with some kinds of prejudice against them. And Craig and the other people from our lived experience team will openly admit that they have also seen that happen within Gamblers Anonymous. So we don't have women on this board, but actually it's quite difficult for them. It's more difficult for them sometimes to admit that they have a problem, because of course women are seen often as mothers, caregivers. They're supposed to be the ones that are more responsible, looking after the family, so they can encounter a lot of judgment around those things, and you'll hear me speak about stigma in a little while, but especially from a female perspective, there's a lot of stigma that is attributed to gambling related harm with women. Craig, did you also talk about industry staff?
Yeah, we did. It was the one that popped up on there. It's just as you disappeared. I mentioned the fact that if you're surrounded by it, and it's something that we've seen a lot of, the larger we've got as a company, we're fortunate. And just to pick up slightly on the point that Joe mentioned about the women, it's something we're all very, very passionate about. It's we're fortunate enough now to have a lived experience lady who works for us, who we've got a video of. We've done one of Affected Others, which of course was a woman also. But the industry staff is quite often the one that's almost put at the back of the queue, particularly people in land-based, if it's in casinos or in bookmakers, and they're physically seeing cash, seeing people win, quite often not on the greatest salary themselves, working unsociable hours. It's when we see the statistics worldwide, we deal on a couple of lived experience panels with different operators over the world. It's terrifying how often industry staff are right at the top of people who are more, the most vulnerable.
Yeah. So we've identified the sorts of groups that are vulnerable. We've looked at the kind of behaviors that you might be able to see on somebody's gambling, the data-driven types of things. And we've looked at the sort of softer behaviors that you might be able to identify when you actually have contact with your customers. But at the back of all of that, there's stigma. For anybody on this call that doesn't know what stigma is, it's the disapproval of or the discrimination against something or somebody, that where you can label or stereotype people in a negative way just based on your own preconceived ideas about what that is. So what we know is that it's getting better now, but quite often people who were ready to admit that they had a gambling problem, a very serious gambling problem, might go to their doctors, and two things. First of all, would get the attitude from the doctor or medical professional to say, oh, I didn't think that you would be, you know, stupid with money like that. But also they don't know what to do with that person. They don't know where to refer them or where to send them for help. So stigma is the leading reason that problem gamblers don't seek treatment. We know that because, you know, the general public perception, and I don't know about in Bulgaria, but in the UK, people don't like to talk about money. Money is a very hot topic. You would never ask people how much they earn, or you wouldn't ask them what they do with their money, and you would never, you know, it's just not a topic that people enjoy talking about. But especially when it comes to spending your money in a way that is out of control and that you feel that you need help with, it's something that most people don't really understand. And so that is the leading reason why people don't look for the help that they need quickly enough. And that's why it's also really important for operators, when they identify that somebody needs help, that they're able to, without judgment, put them in touch with the right organizations that can provide that help for them. And also, you know, if you can get the opportunity to have this conversation with your customer, whether it be by email or web chat, you know, to let them know that they're not alone, that this does happen to people. It's the message, it's the first message that you're given in GA, Gamblers Anonymous, when you go there, is you're welcomed in and you're told you are not alone. And it's a very powerful message for people who are seeking help, to know that it's not just them, because what we also know from lived experience is that very much you feel that you're the only person that's going through this, and that nobody else can possibly understand how gambling has impacted every part of your life, and has taken all of your financial wherewithal, probably all of your savings, and led you into debt. And you feel that you're the only person that could possibly be in that position. So it's so important to let, if you can, to let your customers know that they're not alone, and that there are places that they can go and seek help and treatment, and that recovery is something that is very much possible.
If I could just add to that, Joe, the other thing that we also mention, and is an ongoing sort of learning to ourselves as well, I think, is the stigma is on both sides of the fence with this. It's not just, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to see it from an addict, and also to see it as somebody who's works in this profession. We understand how difficult it is for people in the, you know, in the RG world, the SG world, to ask these difficult questions that we, and as an addict myself, are almost praying that people ask, because nobody asked me. But one of the things that we can say with a foot in both camps is we understand there's a stigma for somebody to change your personality, almost to change your culture, to ask somebody questions that you wouldn't ordinarily ask them. That it almost feels wrong to ask them. But we can also say it with absolute authority and with absolute sincerity that all of us, as lived experience, wish we were asked them. So it's something that really works in the room more, I think, than when we do it over sort of Zoom or on Teams. Is we give people you know, the opportunity to say, when would you like to have been asked? That's probably the only question we can't definitively answer, because it's looking back in time. But every one of us, every man, every woman that I've ever met in recovery, have all said the same. I understand it's difficult for you to be asking somebody, you know, with your preconceived ideas and stigma, as Joe just brilliantly explained, but it's so important that it's done. And it's the ethos of everything we do, really.
Thanks, Craig. So what is it that we do? So we do all sorts of types of training. Here you can see the gambling spectrum on the screen. So we use this to really illustrate, you know, how a gambler's journey can be, and really to help operators understand that the sweet spot there really is in the middle. This is when you ideally want to interact as much as possible with your customers, to make sure that they are enjoying their gambling, that the money that they're spending on their gambling is affordable to them, and that they also understand gambling literacy, really, which is that, you know, you're not always going to win. You might win, but there's a greater possibility that you will lose, and to understand that that amount of money is something that you can afford to lose, both in a physical sense and also, you know, mentally for you, that you can accept that you may well lose that money. And so really that sweet spot in the middle is, you know, the time to interact as much as possible with gamblers, but also when you can see that something is different, as I explained before. When you can see that something looks different on somebody's account, that's when you need to understand a little bit more about what might be going on. So we use this gambling spectrum to really illustrate, you know, how things can progress, and finally to that point right in the red where you've lost that person as a customer. And, you know, when we talk to industry, we're all about protecting their customer base. So if you can interact with customers early in their journey, you can stop them from getting, or you've got a bigger chance of stopping them from getting to that point. But you also have to be realistic and understand, with the best will in the world, the best skills, the best AI, the best data, you're not ever going to stop absolutely everybody from having a problem. And sometimes it's important for industry to also understand that, that, you know, there will be certain things that you can't affect, and to make sure that you don't let that weigh too heavy on your heart, and to know that when you're working, you will do the best that you can to ensure your customers stay in a safe place. But after you have spoken to them, whether that be over the phone or by web chat or email, that you then can't affect, you know, what happens after that contact. It's up to the customer then to reflect on the things that you have spoken about together. We also have a Gambling Harm podcast, where our lived experience team talk about their experiences with gambling. That is accessible on all platforms. So if any of you want to have a look at that, you can access that through YouTube, through what are the other platforms, Craig, that you can access it through? Instagram,
Spotify, Apple, normal Apple Podcast. It's everywhere.
Yeah, so it's very accessible. I think we've got about 6 episodes or so out currently, and we've got some more to come as well. And also we provide gambling harm awareness sessions throughout industry, and those sessions are where somebody like Craig from our team, who's experienced gambling related harm, will talk about their experience in a webinar such as this, so that, you know, usually a wide base of people within industry, so sometimes up to 300 or 400 people might be on the webinar, and they will get the understanding of what that was like to experience gambling related harm. And so the sorts of people that might join that are people that are not in customer service and not even in customer reactivation, but they might be people that are involved in the design of the products, or in the marketing teams, or just the general, you know, the tech teams. Because even for those people, we know that it is important for them, because they work in the gambling industry. So we know that they are a vulnerable group, as Craig explained before. But also, it's really important for them to understand, you know, because of the job that they do, you know, if they can actually, you know, if they just for 1 second think about that element, it might actually change some aspect of what they're planning to do from a tech or a marketing point of view, those kind of messages that you might be sending out to customers inadvertently, or perhaps things in games like speed of games, messaging within games that you might have a slightly different take on after you've listened to this story of gambling related harm. And finally, really, and one of the most important things from the perspective of what we do within Epic is the importance of evaluation. So I can definitely say from my time, you know, more than 20 years of working within the gambling industry, I had lots of training. We had training all the time. We had psychologists come in and talk about gambling related harm. We'd have anti-money laundering specialists come in and talk about terrorist financing and the threat of human trafficking and how that can have an impact and be be something that you should be mindful of when you work within this industry. And we had lots of training about social responsibility, responsible gambling, responsible gaming, and what we should do to keep our customers in a safe place. But that training was never conducted by anybody who had worked in the industry themselves, and was never conducted by anybody who had experienced gambling related harm. And also there was never any follow-up. So it was really, you know, you could have a good piece of training. It might be a nice story, but afterwards you would just go back to doing your job in the same way as you were doing it before, because it didn't feel impactful to you within the job that you're doing. So when we created the training within Epic, we were very mindful of the importance of evaluation. So within our training that we do with industry, and even when we go and speak to the young sportsmen and women, we conduct evaluations. So we go back afterwards and say, what do you remember about the training? What have you used? What would you have liked more of? How did it work when you used it? Did you feel confident? Would you use it again? Did you use it and it didn't have the desired effect that you wanted, but then you tried it in a different way and then it did? And a lot of it is about confidence levels. It's about empowering the staff within the gambling industry to feel more confident asking those questions that can seem quite difficult questions to ask, and Craig spoke about it earlier on, about the stigma from the industry about asking your players questions and not knowing how to approach players in the right way. And so we recognized that it was really important for us to actually evaluate before the session to find out what people's confidence and levels and understanding about responsible gaming is, to evaluate immediately after the session with the same questions to see whether the training has had an immediate impact, which of course is good, but also to go back 3 months, 6 months later and say, exactly the things that I said earlier on. What do you remember about it? What have you used? And we have been very pleasantly and surprised and also really amazed by the feedback that we get after the session, and the sorts of things that people say about how they have used the information, how the lived experience story has really impacted them in a positive way, to help them understand a gambler's mindset a bit better or in a different way than they understood it before. And we also ask them to provide, free text answers to say what you found useful, what are you going to use, how has this messaging taken your understanding about gambling forwards? And there's some examples there on the screen. But I think for me, the most exciting thing is when you go back a few months later and the staff that you trained, you did the training with, are very excited to tell you exactly what they have used. And it can be just the simplest things, just that one about, are you enjoying your gambling, and what is it that you're enjoying about your gambling? It's such a powerful line of questioning, and it provides really amazing insights into your customer. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining Craig and myself. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today. I really hope that you could understand us okay, and sorry about the tech issues earlier on. So now I'm just going to throw it open and see if anybody has any questions that they would
Thanks,
like
guys.
to ask.
Joe, can you see the questions on the screen, or can only I see them?
No, I can't
Right,
see
so
them.
we've already had a few questions. Again, I echo Joe's point there. I hope you can understand. I mean, I know you can understand Joe better than me, but I do try and slow down as much as I can. And there's been a few questions already. Thank you all for them. Antonio has come up with in fact, amazingly, I don't think I've ever been. It's always, every time we do this, we always look at each other and hope we get asked something we've never been asked before. So
I
Antonio's.
can see 2 questions, but that's...
Oh, there you go. Well, well, that's because I haven't scrolled down to the other one. So there's, what's the main difference between operators that want to invest in RG and those who don't? Start off with an easy one. I mean, so I'll go first. Now, interestingly, it's a discussion we often have, and I see it almost from both sides of sort of through 2 prisms, really. From the commercial side of it, I understand the fear almost and the reticence from, particularly as we now go towards North America and throughout Europe, the more countries who are now thinking maybe we should be doing some more RG, even when they're not mandated to do it. When I first started in this industry, I couldn't quite understand why we kept talking about sustainability, because I came at it through the lens of recovery, thinking, you should try and look after customers because it's morally correct and it's socially correct and it's what you should do as a nice human being. I mentioned earlier on, I've been a used car dealer all my life, so I understand commerciality and that you've got to make the money before you make anything else. And if I'm honest, I probably didn't look after my customers the way that the gambling industry are now trying to do with theirs. But it's a two-edged sword because, as Joe mentioned earlier on, I wish I could have a bet today, and I don't want to do it to the point where I'm going to be stealing money from the business that I ran, which I did. And the industry's lost me and 3 of my 4 brothers, lots of my friends, my partner, lots of colleagues, because I was allowed to go on. So to answer that question, I think it's short-sightedness. I think there's a bit of fear. I think sometimes people think, if we tell customers that that we're looking after you, education's a huge thing, both from the operator and from the customer's point of view. Not many people know enough about it, the reason why it's there. An awful lot of it just think that it's a barrier that companies are putting there. So it's quite a long road to walk, but the fact that, the likes of yourselves are already asking us to come and speak to you when you're not being told to do it is a huge step forward, I think.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything to that, Joe?
No, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. The thing is for us, we're here once the business, recognizes that that they really need some more education around how to keep their customers in a safe place. We're here for that. And quite often, operators will hear about the work that we've done, and then they will approach us, where previously they weren't that open to having a conversation. But it's really, I think also, quite often there's a fear from operators that we're going to come in and say, oh, you've been doing everything wrong. You need to change all of your processes and this and that. That's not about what it is at all. It's about looking at what they currently do and adding to that and working, you know, as a complementary asset to just look at things from a slightly different point of view, from the point of view of gambling addiction and from the point of view of people that have also worked in the business.
Absolutely.
To actually put that viewpoint.
That's a great question. Why do schools and universities tend to focus more on topics such as alcohol and drugs rather than gambling? Well, it's absolutely a one that is changing slowly in the UK, but I find it really interesting that that question's asked from a European point of view. So it's obviously the same there. Joe's probably got more experience. Well, certainly more as a parent. I'm a new step parent. The best thing that's ever happened to is my little lad who I love to bits. 6 years coming up to. Quickly on this one, I would say the reason behind it is again naivety. I think we spoke to over 30,000 children last year, and in every session, one of the first questions we ask is, does anybody in here gamble? Well, the answer should be no, because they're all under 18, but they almost all do, whether that's Fortnite, Roblox, FIFA, whatever it may be. So it's just the nuance of language, I think, is what the change is. It's why, interestingly, when we talk to you today, we talk about gaming, not gambling. Look, it's the same thing. You know, it's changing. But again, very briefly, it was the same at my doctor's. I know Joe touched on it when she was talking to you. My doctor didn't know anything about gambling addiction, and that's only 6 years ago. So that would be my answer on that. But Joe's got two nearly grown-up children, so she's got a bit more experience than me.
Yeah, I mean, that feeds into questions just come in on my screen. Why are young people so affected by gambling addiction, and they tend to more easily develop addiction? It's a good question, and it's a very relevant question, and it feeds into what Craig just said. So there's the gambleification of several products now. So whatever your kids are playing on, or you're on their iPads, there's usually, you know, not for money necessarily, but, you know, an element of gambling where you can trade things with other players, or you can, you know, there's this element.
You might have to leave and come back in again. But it did exactly the same thing. It just completely cut off. He's gone. So yeah, it's something that I've seen, you know, and you know, even in my later life to come in to see it's amazing how kids almost know about it so much. The anonymous one, I'll address that one ever so quickly. So thanks so much for saying that, for sharing my story. I know you just got a snippet of it today. And I didn't really have a choice as the answer to overcome my addiction. I know it sounds quite flippant, but I got caught and I had to change my life. And we wouldn't have time to go into it all today, to be absolutely fair. I'd be happy to speak to anyone on email about it. But GA, sharing it with family, friends, and my job, if I'm honest, my job helps me enormously, being able to get feedback and speak to people all the time. Joy, are you back?
Yeah, yes, I'm back. I don't know why it keeps doing that.
Never mind.
So I've lost my questions now, but yeah, so if you give me another question.
Yeah, so I was wondering whether there's a different. Well, this is a nice one because Joe's just led and created the first ever land-based casino training sessions with the Hippodrome in London, who everyone will be aware of, one of the biggest casinos in the world. So the last question we've got here is, I was wondering whether there is a difference between the gambling addicts that visit land-based casinos and the ones that play online.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is pretty much, you know, not 100%, but most people that play land-based, they're also playing online. So that's the first thing to say about that. Quite often what you see in land-based casinos is they're actually playing online at the same time as they're actually playing in the casino. The difference is really that, you know, you have different markers for those people. You don't have all of the data that you have for an online player. You don't have all that data, the rich data that you can see about all of their play with that online operator. You only have what you can see in front of you with that customer, and understanding the same as online that customer will go elsewhere and play in other casinos as well. So it is different because you have that very physical face-to-face point of contact. So you have probably a lot more opportunities to actually understand how your customer is feeling about their gambling. Whereas online, you've got all of those data-driven opportunities, but probably less of less avenues to actually contact that customer personally. And of course, you're never going to get that face-to-face contact. So it's very different in terms of identifying what looks like risky or harmed behavior, but certainly in terms of identifying it, there are specific things that you can identify within land-based and within online. But you know, harmed behavior is harmed behavior, whether that be online or within the land-based.
So there's a couple more coming, Joe. Can you see them? In terms of the two, Danny and the anonymous one, how can people close to you help you overcome your addiction, and what's the best way to prevent developing gambling addiction? How long have you got? We could sit here until 6 p.m. tonight. It's those are questions I still ask myself, if I'm honest, 6 years into my recovery. In terms of the close to you help you overcome your addiction, support would be my instant answer that comes to that. And the work that we do at Epic is prevention as opposed to treatment. So it's, although it's something that I live every day in my life, there has to be personal responsibility. It has to be, and one of the biggest things that I see in people in very early recovery is that they don't accept their own failings. They don't accept that it was. It's not the gambling operator's fault that I became addicted. They didn't help in the way that we think they can do, and we see happening every day in the work that we do. Which sort of ties in a little bit in what's the best way to prevent developing gambling addiction, is we firmly believe, and we see it in the results of the brilliant teams that we work with, when we listen to QA calls and hear them try the things that we almost beg them to do when we're doing them in training. And it's such a fulfilling thing for all of us when we listen to these calls and hear them ask a question in the way that we say, we promise them that it will work. It's incredible to hear it work, and that works both ways, because it's so much easier to ask it the second time.
So I'm going to go ahead and answer the next question. So it says, thank you for the session. We want to be responsible in gaming, and at the same time, the CSR and job opportunity that comes with online casino betting shops and casino. What can we do to create job opportunity and job security? I think, you know, this kind of like feeds into the fact that, you know, job opportunity and security, you can do it through the lens of asking these questions to your customers and creating that you know, bond and relationship between you and your customer. Interestingly, the European teams that we work with, at the end of their conversations with their customers, when they speak to them over the phone, they actually say to them at the end, what did you think about us asking you these questions? It's actually within their protocol, within Entain. And they get really, really positive feedback. And so what happens as a result of that is the people that are doing that job, they feel more confident. And with confidence comes that ability to ask more questions. It creates better job satisfaction and it creates better job security, because you're actually not coming to work and feeling nervous about what you're going to deal with today, because you have the skills to deal with it, and you've been given those opportunities to practice those skills. And believe me, you know, I speak from experience when I say I've spent a long time being scared about talking to customers and asking them more sort of searching questions about how they were feeling about their gambling. But once I started to do it and saw the, you know, the impact and what the feedback is that you get from asking those questions, it just made my confidence grow, and it gave me much better job satisfaction and job security in my eyes. So I hope I answered the question okay then. What is the best way to prevent developing gambling addiction? I mean, it's a difficult one because you know, the best way really from industry point of view is to get in early enough with those customers, and to, as we said earlier on in the presentation, is to get interacting with your customers to early enough so that they're not going to get to that point, so that you can actually bring them back from the behaviors that look risky and that look like not normal behaviors for them. Is the digitization makes it easier to develop gambling addiction? Yes, I would say that definitely is the case. We know because of online, the ease of online, and also because there's a lot of black market, so unregulated online products, much more so than in the land-based sector. There's a lot more avenues where you could remain unchecked, and especially within jurisdictions that still don't necessarily have you know, very strict guidelines. You can find that you know, people are more likely to experience a problem with digitization. One of the main problems with digitization is the speed of which people can change products, use new payment methods, perhaps. You know, slots play is a lot, can be a lot faster on the online product. So yes, I would say that digitization definitely has been a big factor in there being an increased amount of problem gamblers, but also an increased amount of legislation as well relating to gambling. How can people close to you help you overcome your addiction? I think, you know, that once you're addicted, then, you know, you need to be directed to points of help. So with that, I'm talking about Gamblers Anonymous, or any of the local, the helpline that you have in Bulgaria. You know, once somebody has admitted that they have a serious problem with gambling, then they must seek professional help. And, you know, it's important to support them. You can support them in terms of, you know, letting them know that you're there from a place of love and not from judgment. And to also understand probably that you don't really understand everything about what they're going through, and that you probably don't have the answers, that they will need to seek those answers from professional help. And the last one I have here is, I know of a person who is addicted but was really praising casino for giving hopes like friendship, happy staff, that made him fight stress and depression. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure quite of what the question is here exactly. Whether they're saying that this person was helped by the casino staff. I think they are. So yeah, you know, it's really good if the casino staff can be obviously friendly and you know, and be happy. But the casino staff must also have the understanding and the education about what looks like risky behavior and how to have conversations that will identify whether that person is playing in a way that feels unaffordable to them longer term or feels not enjoyable to them. And also be able to understand where to signpost that person. The question was specifically related to somebody who was says that they were addicted. At that point, you must get that person on a self-exclusion and signpost them to the correct place, because they now need that point of recovery. It's fantastic that the staff are friendly and happy, but they really need to be signposted to somewhere where they can actually get professional help at that point. Should the marketing of betting companies be prevented, reducing addiction and people from knowing the product? It's a very hot topic. Marketing is, it's very important to get the messaging right. Marketers will always want to promote their products, and Epic do work with marketing teams to help them to understand how to do that in a safe way. But ultimately, the marketing teams it's their job to actually promote the products. But to make sure, really, I think really it probably starts a step back from the marketing team, is the people that are designing the products should ensure that those products are not, don't have addictive qualities to them. For example, speed play. Recently in the UK, it was mandated that slots had to be set to a slower rate of play, because people were losing that ability to have a decision-making break in their play, so that they could think about the amount of time and money that they've been spending on that product. So I think, marketing is okay, and obviously it's going to happen. But I think, the step back from that is to make sure that the products that you're marketing are ones that aren't going to cause damage to your customers. And I think that is it. I don't know where Craig went. I apologize.
No problem. Maybe something wrong with the connection with the internet. Thank you that you're taking time here today to share with us knowledge and giving real life examples. It was a pleasure for us.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure for me. I hope very much that that you could understand us, and I hope that you really got something from this presentation.
Thank you so much. I want to remind the audience that today we have one more webinar at 1 o'clock, and we will start with Leon Xiao.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have an amazing day.
Thank you, Joanna. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.